Diana Frances Spencer was born on July 1st, 1961, in Sandringham, Norfolk, England. She grew up in a wealthy family, but her childhood was not easy. Her parents divorced when she was just 8 years old, and that experience stayed with her for the rest of her life. She was not the kind of person who was born into royalty. She worked as a kindergarten teacher and a nanny before she met Prince Charles. People who knew her back then say she was quiet, kind, and genuinely caring. She was not trying to become famous. She was just living her life. When she married Prince Charles on July 29, 1981, over 750 million people watched the wedding on television around the world. To most people watching, it looked like a fairy tale. But Diana herself later said that she had serious doubts even before she walked down the aisle. She knew the marriage was going to be difficult. She went ahead anyway. What the public saw was a young woman in a beautiful dress, smiling and waving. What they didn't see was someone who was already feeling alone inside one of the most powerful institutions in the world.
Living inside Buckingham Palace was nothing like what people imagined from the outside. Diana described it as cold and isolating. There were strict rules about everything: what to say, what to wear, how to behave in public, and even how to raise her children. She gave birth to Prince William in 1982 and Prince Harry in 1984. Being a mother gave her real joy. People close to her say that her children were the center of her world. She would take them to theme parks, McDonald's, and hospitals to visit sick children. She wanted them to understand real life, not just palace life. But inside the marriage, things were falling apart. Charles and Diana were two very different people. The relationship between Diana and the wider royal institution became very tense. She felt she was not getting support from the people around her. She later gave a private interview where she talked honestly about suffering from depression, struggling with an eating disorder, and feeling completely cut off from help. These were not small things. They were serious struggles that she was going through while still performing her public duties and smiling for cameras every single day.
By the early 1990s, it was clear to almost everyone that the marriage between Charles and Diana was over in every real sense. Both of them had spoken about it privately, and both had relationships outside the marriage. In 1992, a book written by Andrew Morton was published. It was called Diana, Her True Story. It revealed personal details about Diana's life inside the royal family that shocked the public. What most people did not know at the time was that Diana herself had secretly cooperated with the book. She had recorded hours of private conversations that Morton used as the basis of the story. Then in November 1995, Diana gave one of the most watched television interviews in British history. She sat down with journalist Martin Bashir on the BBC program Panorama. In that interview, she spoke openly about her marriage, her struggles, and her role. She said something that people still remember today. She said she wanted to be a queen in people's hearts. The interview was watched by 23 million people in the UK alone. It was a turning point. The Queen herself wrote to both Charles and Diana shortly after and said that an early divorce was now the right course of action. The divorce was finalized in August 1996. Diana lost the title of Her Royal Highness. She kept the title Princess of Wales, but she was no longer considered a member of the royal family in the official sense.
After the divorce, Diana did not disappear. If anything, she became more active and more independent than ever before. She continued her humanitarian work. She was pushing hard on the landmine campaign, working with the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, which went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize that same year, 1997. She was also in a relationship with Dodi Fayed, the son of Egyptian businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed, who owned Harrods department store in London at the time. The relationship had started in the summer of 1997. They were seen together on a yacht in the south of France, and photographs of them were published in newspapers around the world. The media attention on Diana had not gone down after the divorce. It had actually increased. Photographers followed her everywhere. She could not go out without being chased. It had become a serious issue for her safety and for the safety of people around her. In August 1997, Diana and Dodi were in Paris. They had been staying at the Ritz Hotel, which was owned by Dodi's father. On the night of August 30, they left the hotel. They were being followed by photographers on motorcycles and in cars. Their driver, Henri Paul, took them through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel.
It was just past midnight on August 31, 1997.
Inside the tunnel, the car lost control and hit a pillar. The crash was severe. Dodi Fayed and Henri Paul died at the scene. Diana was still alive when emergency services arrived, but she had serious internal injuries. She was taken to Petit-Salpêtrière Hospital, where doctors worked on her for hours. She was pronounced dead at 4 a.m. The bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, survived, but had serious injuries and said he had no memory of the moments just before the crash. French authorities began an investigation almost immediately. The initial findings pointed to Henri Paul being drunk at the time of the crash. Blood tests showed a high level of alcohol in his system, as well as traces of prescription medication. The speed of the car in the tunnel was also a major factor. In 1999, French investigators officially closed the case and ruled the crash an accident caused by Henri Paul driving under the influence of alcohol while being pursued by photographers. British authorities also conducted their own inquiry. Operation Paget, led by Lord Stevens, was a 3-year investigation completed in 2006. It looked into every major conspiracy theory and examined thousands of pieces of evidence. The conclusion was the same. The crash was an accident. There was no evidence of a wider plot. A formal British inquest jury delivered its verdict in April 2008. The jury found that Diana and Dodi were unlawfully killed due to the grossly negligent driving of Henri Paul and the pursuing vehicles driven by the photographers.
Despite 2 major official investigations, many people around the world still did not accept the accident explanation. And it is worth looking honestly at why those doubts existed and what the evidence actually shows. The most widely discussed theory was that British intelligence services, specifically MI6, had ordered the crash to stop Diana from marrying Dodi Fayed, possibly because she was pregnant with his child or because her influence was becoming a political problem. Mohammed Al-Fayed pushed this theory publicly for many years. Operation Paget specifically investigated these claims. Investigators found no evidence that Diana was pregnant at the time of her death. They found no evidence that MI6 was involved in any way. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses and examined financial records, communications, and physical evidence from the scene. Another question raised was about Henri Paul's blood tests. Some people argued the samples may have been mixed up or tampered with. The investigation looked into this and found no credible evidence that the samples were switched. There were also questions about why it took so long for Diana to reach the hospital, since the crash site was not far from several medical facilities. Medical experts explained that French emergency protocol at the time focused on treating patients at the scene before moving them, which was standard procedure in France. None of the conspiracy theories held up when placed against the documented evidence. That does not mean every question has a satisfying answer, but what the investigations found was that this was a high-speed crash in a tunnel, caused by a driver who should not have been behind the wheel.
Diana died at 36 years old. In the days after her death, something happened that nobody had quite planned for. People left flowers outside Kensington Palace in such numbers that the pile eventually stretched for hundreds of meters. People who had never met her were crying in public. The scale of grief was something Britain had not seen in living memory. Her funeral was held on September 6, 1997. Over 1 million people lined the streets of London to watch the procession. Around 2.5 billion people watched it on television around the world. Elton John performed a reworked version of Candle in the Wind at Westminster Abbey. The Queen, who had initially remained at Balmoral in Scotland with the young princes, returned to London and gave a televised address. It was a rare moment of the royal family responding to public pressure in a very visible way. In the years since, Diana's impact has continued. The international campaign she supported to ban landmines led to the Ottawa Treaty, which has been signed by 164 countries. Her HIV and AIDS work helped change how the public understood the disease. The Diana Award, set up in her memory, continues to recognize young people doing positive work in their communities. Her sons, William and Harry, have both spoken about how losing their mother affected them deeply. Both have spoken publicly about the importance of mental health, something Diana was one of the first members of the royal family to discuss openly. What Diana represented was something simple but rare.
She was a person in an extremely powerful position who chose to use that position to sit beside people who were suffering. That is what people remember. Not the titles, not the dresses, not the palace. The woman who showed up, sat down, and actually listened. That is the story of Diana, and in many ways, it is still being told.